Do you really know the woman you've chosen? Or perhaps she's merely the projection of your own unconscious soul, an illusion that, sooner or later, will transform into an abyss. You've felt it, haven't you? That moment when the woman you thought you knew becomes a stranger, when her warmth turns to ice, when her love transforms into indifference, when the goddess you worshipped reveals herself as something far more complex, far more dangerous, far more human. Carl Jung left a silent warning, ignored by most men. The woman you desire, love, or idealize is not who you think she is. She carries, in the depths of her psyche, hidden forces, millennial archetypes, and a feminine shadow that, when unknown, turns against you and against herself. Your attraction, the enchantment, and even the suffering in relationships are not accidental. They are direct expressions of the unconscious dynamic between your wounded anima and the projected feminine shadow. And the question you should be asking is not, why did she change? But rather, what in her reveals what I never wanted to see in myself? Today, you're about to discover the most devastating truth Jung revealed about the feminine psyche. A truth that explains why your relationships follow the same painful patterns, why the women you choose seem to transform before your eyes, and why you keep falling into the same emotional traps over and over again. This isn't about blaming women. This isn't about demonizing the feminine. This is about understanding the profound psychological forces at play when masculine and feminine energies collide in the unconscious battlefield of intimate relationships. You're about to learn how the shadow woman operates, why she appears in your life at specific moments, and most importantly, how recognizing her can save you from a lifetime of romantic illusions and emotional devastation. In analytical psychology, Jung reveals that every man carries within himself a feminine psychic image, the type anima. She is not just a romantic fantasy, but the true reflection of your own emotional, intuitive, and affective unconscious. Think about it. Every time you've fallen deeply in love, what were you really seeing? The actual woman standing before you? Or were you seeing something else? A projection of your own soul's deepest longings, fears, and unresolved emotional wounds. The man who doesn't know his anima is doomed to seek her outside, projecting this image onto the women he encounters. In the beginning, she appears as the perfect muse, beautiful, sensitive, understanding, magical. You feel like you've finally found the one. You feel complete. You feel alive in ways you never imagined possible. But what you don't realize is that this woman also carries her own shadow, the dark and instinctive side of the feminine. She is not only nurturing, welcoming, loving. She is also the devourer, the manipulator, the one who seduces, controls, rejects, grows cold, and punishes. When a man is unaware of this, he doesn't see the real woman. He sees a distorted mirror of his own unconscious. Let me paint you a picture of how this plays out in real life. You meet her, and something inside you recognizes her immediately. It's not logical, it's deeper than that. Your soul whispers, "This is her. This is the one I've been searching for." The chemistry is undeniable. The connection feels destined. Every moment with her feels like coming home to a place you never knew existed. You project onto her all the qualities of the eternal feminine. She becomes your savior, your healer, your inspiration. She represents everything soft and beautiful in a harsh world. Through her, you feel you can access parts of yourself you've kept locked away, your emotions, your vulnerability, your capacity for tenderness. But here's what Jung understood that you don't. This projection is a double-edged sword. The very qualities you adore in her, the mystery, the emotional depth, the intuitive wisdom, these same qualities have a shadow side. And when that shadow emerges, you won't be prepared. The nurturing mother becomes the devouring mother. The sensual goddess becomes the cold rejecter. The wise woman becomes the manipulative witch. And you stand there confused, asking yourself, what happened to the woman I fell in love with? The answer is both simple and devastating. She was never there. What you fell in love with was your own anima, your soul's feminine aspect, projected onto a real woman who has her own complexities, her own shadows, her own wounds. You see, every woman carries within her psyche powerful archetypal forces. These aren't just psychological concepts. They're living energies that shape her behavior, her emotions, her relationships. And when you don't understand these forces, you're playing a game whose rules you don't know. The shadow feminine isn't evil. It's not something to be feared or avoided. It's the repressed, denied, and undeveloped aspects of feminine consciousness. In our culture, women are taught to be nice, accommodating, nurturing. But what happens to their anger, their sexuality, their power, their wildness? It goes into the shadow. And in intimate relationships, under the pressure of projection and expectation, this shadow emerges. The woman who seems so perfect begins to show other faces. She becomes moody, unpredictable. She withdraws her affection. She tests you in ways that seem cruel. She becomes everything she swore she'd never be. You feel betrayed. You feel like she deceived you. But the truth is far more complex. She's not betraying you. She's integrating parts of herself that were always there, parts that your projection didn't allow room for. Think about your past relationships. Can you see the pattern now? The initial intoxication, the projection of perfection, the inevitable disappointment when she revealed aspects that didn't fit your ideal. This isn't bad luck. This isn't about choosing the wrong women. This is about the fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually happening in the depths of romantic connection. Jung observed that men who haven't integrated their own anima, who haven't made conscious their own feminine side, are particularly susceptible to these projections. They seek in women what they refuse to develop in themselves: emotional intelligence, intuition, the ability to nurture and be nurtured, connection to the unconscious. But here's the trap. When you make a woman responsible for carrying these qualities for you, you're not seeing her as she is. You're using her as a screen for your own psychological movie. And when she inevitably fails to live up to this impossible role, because she's human with her own needs, shadows, and complexities, you feel not just disappointed, but existentially threatened. Your anima projection shatters, and suddenly you're face to face with the shadow feminine. But whose shadow is it really? Hers, or the shadow of your own unintegrated feminine side? The illusion breaks when she begins to become everything you fear most: cold, distant, critical, controlling, unreachable. You ask yourself, why did she close off? Why did she become someone else? The answer is brutal. She never was who you thought. She was who your psyche wanted her to be. When the projection ruptures, you no longer find the enchanted maiden. You find the feminine shadow. The castrating mother who makes you feel like a helpless child. The cruel queen who demands perfection while offering criticism. The woman who seduces you only to humiliate you. The one who loves, only to later deny that love ever existed in this moment. The unconscious game reveals itself. You're not dealing with her. You're dealing with yourself. With your own emotional wounds, your fear of abandonment, your emotional void, your dependence on validation, and your refusal to confront your own soul. Let me tell you about a man I'll call David. David was successful, confident, had his life together, or so it seemed. He met Sarah at a conference. She was everything he'd dreamed of: intelligent, beautiful, with a depth that seemed to promise endless discovery. Their connection was immediate and profound. For 6 months, David lived in paradise. Sarah seemed to understand him in ways no one else ever had. She nurtured his dreams, soothed his anxieties, brought color to his black and white world. He told his friends he'd found his soulmate. He started planning a future, imagining children growing old together. Then, subtly at first, things began to shift. Sarah became moody. She'd withdraw without explanation. The warmth in her eyes would suddenly turn cold. She'd make cutting remarks that left him reeling. The goddess was revealing her shadow. David's response was typical. He tried harder. He bought flowers, planned romantic getaways, constantly asked what was wrong. But the more he pursued, the more she withdrew. The more he needed her warmth, the colder she became. He was caught in a dance he didn't understand, following steps to music he couldn't hear. What David didn't realize was that Sarah was struggling with the weight of his projections. She felt suffocated by his need for her to be his emotional salvation. His constant need for reassurance triggered her own shadow, the part of her that feared being consumed, that needed independence, that resented being cast as someone's mother-lover therapist. But even deeper than that, Sarah's shadow feminine was responding to David's unconscious shadow. His unintegrated anima, needy, devouring, desperate for feminine validation, was calling forth her dark feminine in response. It's a psychological law. What we repress in ourselves, we attract in others. The confrontation came one night when Sarah, in a moment of cruel clarity, told him, "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love what I represent to you, but you've never actually seen me." David felt like his world was ending. The woman he'd worshipped was speaking words that cut to his core. But in that devastating moment, if he'd had the courage to really listen, he would have heard the voice of truth, not just Sarah's truth, but the truth of his own soul. This is the moment Jung warned about, the moment when the projection collapses and you're left face to face with reality. Not the reality of who she is, though that's part of it, but the reality of who you are. The reality of your own unintegrated psyche, your own refusal to develop emotional autonomy, your own shadow. The shadow woman appears in many forms. The terrible mother. She makes you feel small, inadequate, like a child who can never please her. Nothing you do is good enough. She criticizes, controls, manipulates through guilt. But ask yourself, where in your psyche lives the wounded child still seeking mother's approval? The dark seductress. She pulls you in with sexuality and mystery, only to reject you at your most vulnerable. She plays with your desire, uses it against you. But examine honestly, where in you lives the shadow of unintegrated sexuality, the part that sees the feminine as either virgin or whore. The Ice Queen. Emotionally unavailable, she remains forever out of reach. The more you pursue, the more she retreats. She mirrors back to you your own emotional unavailability, your own inability to be truly intimate without losing yourself. The devouring feminine. She consumes your time, energy, identity. She needs constant attention, validation, reassurance. She reflects your own unconscious need to merge, to lose yourself in another, rather than stand sovereign in your own being. Each of these shadow manifestations is both real, in that women can embody these energies, and projection, in that what triggers you most intensely in her is pointing to something unresolved in you. You must understand something crucial. The shadow feminine isn't your enemy, she's your teacher. She appears in your life not to destroy you, but to force you into consciousness. Every woman who has ever triggered your deepest wounds was offering you a gift. The gift of seeing yourself clearly. When she becomes cold, she's showing you where you're emotionally dependent. When she becomes critical, she's revealing where you seek external validation. When she becomes controlling, she's exposing where you've given away your power. When she becomes distant, she's highlighting where you've abandoned yourself. This isn't about blame. This isn't about making women responsible for men's psychological development. It's about understanding the profound interconnection between masculine and feminine psyches, and how our unconscious material plays out in the theater of intimate relationship. The real work, is not finding a woman without a shadow. Every human being has a shadow. The work is becoming conscious of your own projections, integrating your own anima, facing your own darkness. Only then can you see her, really see her, as the complex, multifaceted being she actually is. Think about the women you've been most intensely attracted to. What did they represent? What qualities did they embody that felt magical, almost otherworldly? Now think about how those same women disappointed you. What shadows emerged? What darkness did they reveal? If you're honest, you'll see the pattern. The very qualities that attracted you contained their opposite. The nurturer became the smotherer. The free spirit became the unreliable partner. The strong woman became the dominator. This isn't coincidence, it's psychological law. Jung understood that we're attracted to what we need to integrate. The man with an undeveloped feeling function is magnetically drawn to highly emotional women. The man who represses his intuition finds himself fascinated by mystical, intuitive women. The man who denies his own vulnerability is attracted to women who embody the wounded feminine. But here's the crucial insight. Until you develop these qualities within yourself, you'll remain at the mercy of projection. You'll keep falling for the same type of woman, experiencing the same disappointments, repeating the same painful patterns. The shadow woman will keep appearing in your life, wearing different faces, but carrying the same message. Wake up. Become conscious. Stop seeking outside what can only be found within. So how do you break free from this cycle? How do you stop the endless repetition of projection, disappointment, and pain? First, you must recognize when you're projecting. The signs are clear if you know what to look for. Instant, overwhelming attraction that feels like recognition, the sense that she's perfect or exactly what you've been looking for. Putting her on a pedestal, seeing her as more than human, feeling like you need her to be complete. Extreme emotional reactions when she doesn't meet your expectations. When you notice these signs, pause. Ask yourself, what quality am I seeing in her that I haven't developed in myself? What am I hoping she'll provide that I'm not providing for myself? Second, you must begin the work of anima integration. This means developing your own emotional intelligence, intuition, creativity, and capacity for relationship. It means learning to nurture yourself, to access your own inner wisdom, to be comfortable with the non-rational aspects of existence. This is not about becoming feminine in the cultural sense, it's about becoming whole. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you've projected onto women, expected them to carry for you. Third, you must face your own shadow. What parts of yourself do you deny? What emotions do you repress? What needs do you judge as weak or unacceptable? These denied aspects don't disappear. They get projected onto others, particularly onto intimate partners. The man who denies his own neediness will attract extremely needy women and judge them for the very quality he refuses to acknowledge in himself. The man who represses his anger will partner with women who express rage and then feel victimized by their irrational emotions. The man who fears his own darkness will be simultaneously attracted to and repelled by the dark feminine. Fourth, you must learn to see women as they actually are, not as screens for your projections, not as saviors or demons, but as complex beings with their own struggles, shadows, and journey toward wholeness. This requires what Jung called withdrawing the projection. It means catching yourself when you start to idealize or demonize. It means staying present with the actual woman in front of you rather than the fantasy in your head. When she expresses anger, can you see it as her anger rather than your mother's? When she withdraws, can you give her space rather than panic about abandonment? When she shows her shadow, can you remain grounded in your own center rather than being pulled into unconscious reaction? This is mastery. This is what it means to relate consciously rather than through projection. When you begin this work, really begin it, something remarkable happens. The shadow woman stops being your enemy and becomes your ally. Her darkness stops triggering your wounds and starts revealing your potential. Her complexity stops being threatening and becomes fascinating. You begin to appreciate the full spectrum of feminine expression. You understand that the same energy that nurtures can also destroy, and that both are necessary. You see that the feminine shadow carries tremendous power, wisdom, and transformation potential. More importantly, you stop needing women to be anything other than what they are. You stop seeking salvation in relationship. You stop projecting your unlived life onto your partner. You develop what Jung called psychological sovereignty, the ability to stand in your own center, regardless of what's happening in relationship. This doesn't mean becoming invulnerable or disconnected. It means being able to love from wholeness rather than need. It means seeing relationship as a place for mutual growth rather than mutual projection. It means engaging with the full spectrum of your partner's being, light and shadow, without losing yourself. Consider James Jung, another man who went through this transformation. After years of painful relationships with women he idealized and then demonized, he finally began to see the pattern. He entered therapy, began dream work, started paying attention to his projections. The process wasn't easy. He had to face parts of himself he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. He had to feel emotions he'd judged as weak. He had to acknowledge needs he'd deemed unacceptable. He had to integrate aspects of his psyche he'd projected onto every woman he'd ever loved. But as he did this work, something shifted. He met Maria, not a goddess, not a shadow woman, but a real person. He felt attraction, yes, but not the overwhelming projection of before. He could see her clearly, her strengths and vulnerabilities, her light and shadow. When Maria showed her shadow, and she did, because every person has a shadow, James didn't panic. He didn't try to fix her or flee. He stayed present, curious, engaged. He could hold space for her complexity because he'd learned to hold space for his own. Their relationship became a crucible for mutual growth rather than mutual projection. They could fight without demonizing each other. They could love without losing themselves. They could see each other's shadows without being consumed by them. This is the promise on the other side of projection, real relationship. Not the fantasy of finding someone who will complete you, but the reality of two whole people choosing to walk together, shadows and all. She is not who you think. She never was. She is, often, the theater where your unconscious enacts the unresolved dramas of your own psyche. The man who doesn't know his own feminine soul, the Gianima, is condemned to seek outside what could only be found within, and on this path he will be seduced, betrayed, abandoned, rejected, not necessarily by the real woman, but by the projection he placed upon her. The only way out: withdraw the projection. Integrate your own anima. Face the feminine shadow within yourself, instead of chasing it in the women you meet. Only then does a man stop being hostage to unconscious dynamics. Only then does he stop asking, "Why did she change?" and starts asking, "What in me needed to awaken for me to see the truth?" Because in the end, she was never the problem. The problem was always what you didn't want to look at in yourself. Now that you've seen into this deep truth of human relationship, how does it change your perspective? What patterns can you now recognize in your own romantic history? What projections have you been carrying? What shadows have you been fleeing? Share your insights and experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what another man needs to hear to begin his own journey of consciousness. If this video opened your eyes to dynamics you hadn't seen before, hit the like button. It helps more men find this essential wisdom. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the psychology of relationships, the mysteries of the psyche, and the path to psychological sovereignty. And don't miss our previous videos on masculine psychology, shadow work, and the journey to wholeness. Each one builds on the last, creating a comprehensive map for the modern man's psychological journey. Remember, the goal isn't to find a woman without a shadow. The goal is to become a man who can love the whole woman, shadow and light, because you've learned to love the wholeness in yourself. The shadow woman isn't your enemy. She's your invitation to consciousness. She's the catalyst for your psychological evolution. She's the mirror that shows you what you most need to see. Will you accept her invitation? Will you do the work? Will you become the man who can stand sovereign in relationship, loving from wholeness rather than projecting from wound? The choice, as always, is yours. But now, at least, you can no longer say you weren't warned. Carl Jung showed us the way. The question is, are you brave enough to walk it? The woman in your life, past, present, or future, is waiting for you to see her as she truly is. But first, you must see yourself. First, you must integrate your own shadow. First, you must become whole. This is the hero's journey of relationship. This is the path beyond projection. This is the way to love that transforms rather than consumes. Welcome to consciousness. Welcome to the real work. Welcome to the possibility of meeting the feminine, within and without, with eyes truly open. What happens next is up to you.